Hello, friends. For this meditation, I'm going to comment on Revelation chapter 1, verse 9, to the end of the chapter, which is verse 20. I first of all want to draw your attention to all of the sevens we meet in this passage. There are many of them. In verse 11, the Apostle John is told to write to the 7 churches. In verse 12, he begins to see a vision that involves 7 golden lampstands. As he continues to see the vision, in verse 16, he sees the Son of Man, who is Jesus, holding 7 stars. And in verse 20, Jesus tells John, quote, "As for the mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches." That consistent, repeated use of the number 7 reveals the number 7 is being used to help communicate the message of this book. And, as I have told you in earlier meditations, the number 7 symbolizes completeness and perfection. Here is a diagram I gave you last week. What I want you to understand is that the number 7 means John is writing to the complete number of churches. That is, all of the churches that will exist between the 2 advents of Jesus. He describes those churches as lampstands because they are to shine the light of Christ to this world between the 2 advents of Jesus. And he says all of the churches have angels with them. Now, I want to quickly tell you about the word angel. The Greek word angel means messenger, and the word can be used of humans. A very clear example of that is in Luke chapter 7. John the Baptist sent his disciples to ask Jesus a question. Verse 24 mentions them leaving Jesus after doing so. Verse 24 says, when John's messengers had gone, Jesus began to speak to the crowds concerning John. In the Greek text, the word messengers is the word angels. It is very likely Revelation chapter 1, verse 20 is also talking of human messengers, meaning pastors, preachers, the leader of each church, the one responsible for keeping the church faithful. Now, understanding that the lampstands are all of the churches that exist between the 2 advents of Jesus, and understanding that the stars are the pastors of those churches, listen to verses 12 through 16. These verses describe Jesus standing in the midst of the churches. Listen. Then I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me. And on turning, I saw 7 golden lampstands. In the midst of the lampstands was one like a son of man, clothed with a long robe and with a golden sash around his chest. The hairs of his head were white, like white wool, like snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace. And his voice was like the roar of many waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars. From his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in full strength. That last verse is awesome. Underline those first words. In his right hand, he held 7 stars. We are being told that for the sake of churches, Jesus holds in his grip faithful leaders, and he protects them, and he uses them to proclaim his word, which is a 2-edged sword. We are being vividly shown in this passage that Jesus is with his churches. Those churches that are faithfully led and faithfully respond are a bright lampstand, shining the light of Christ to the world. Faithful churches and faithful leaders need to hear this passage, this enlightening vision. We need to hear it for encouragement because we will face tribulation in this world as we wait for the return of Jesus. John mentions the tribulation in verse 9 when he writes, quote, I, John, your brother and partner in the tribulation and the kingdom and the patient endurance that are in Jesus. John calls himself a partner in tribulation. That means the tribulation is real, but this book of Revelation shows us that as we face such tribulation, we are not alone. We are partners with other faithful believers. And Christ Jesus himself, he is in our midst, protecting us, defending us, helping us. That is great truth to know and meditate on. I hope you will do so this week. And then join me again next week as we continue to learn from this wonderful book. Thank you.